10 mechanics tried, not a single one succeeded, but when that woman pulled up in her beat-up pickup truck, her clothes stained with grease and her eyes steady as steel, the millionaire rancher burst out laughing. "You're gonna fix my $500,000 truck?" he mocked in front of all his workers. What she did next made even the Texas sun stop to watch. Hit that subscribe button and tell us down in the comments what state you're watching from, friend. September 2024, Hill Country, Texas. The sun was already punishing hard that morning, the way only Central Texas knows how, when the thermometer hits 95 degrees before 9 a.m. And in all that heat, a woman was driving her old Ford Ranger down the dusty ranch road, leading to the Double R Ranch, the most impressive property in the entire county. Her name was Jessica Tavares, 35 years old. Brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, simple clothes stained with grease, a worn toolbox rattling in the truck bed. She'd driven 12 miles from town, and sweat was running down her face, mixing with the dust from the road. Jessica wasn't there by accident. She was desperate. The mechanic shop where she'd worked for 3 years had shut its doors the week before, another victim of the economic downturn hitting rural America. And right now, when she needed money more than ever. Her mother, Mrs. Solange, needed dental work that would cost $4,000, and her younger brother Kyle was about to start at Texas State. As the oldest of 3 kids, Jessica always felt it was her responsibility to take care of the family, especially after she lost her father. Anthony Tavares had been the best agricultural mechanic in the Hill Country. Everyone who had a tractor, combine, or heavy truck in the region knew Anthony. He had a gift, that kind of talent you don't learn in school, that comes from within, an almost spiritual connection with machines. But 13 years ago, when Jessica was just 22, a sudden heart attack took Anthony from 1 hour to the next. No warning, no time to say goodbye. Mrs. Solange was left a widow with 3 children to raise, no professional qualifications, no steady income. It was the darkest moment in that family's life. Jessica remembers it like it was yesterday. She had just gotten married to her high school sweetheart, Daniel, a kind man who worked as an electrician in town. They were just starting their lives together when her father passed. Jessica didn't have a choice. She needed to help support her mother and younger siblings. But work doing what? She had no experience in anything. That's when she found her father's technical notebooks stored in a box in the back of the closet. Detailed notes on engines, electrical systems, hydraulics, transmissions, hand-drawn diagrams, explanations in careful handwriting, secrets from decades of experience. Jessica started studying those notebooks like they were sacred texts. She watched YouTube videos, read technical manuals online, and practiced on any broken engine she could find. Old tractors abandoned on ranches, trucks that neighbors were going to throw away. She'd take them apart, study them, put them back together until she understood every bolt, every component. And she discovered she'd inherited her father's gift, maybe even more intensely. Jessica developed a specialty in high-power diesel engines, those complex turbos with common rail electronic injection systems that require deep technical knowledge. For 10 years, she and Daniel built a good life together, simple but happy. He supported her unconventional career, proud of his wife who could fix machines that baffled other mechanics. They dreamed of having children someday, of buying a little piece of land outside town. But 3 years ago, everything changed. Daniel was working on a construction site when a scaffolding collapsed. He died before the ambulance arrived. Jessica was 32 years old when she became a widow. No children, just a mountain of medical bills from the failed resuscitation attempts and a heart shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The grief nearly destroyed her. For months, she barely got out of bed. Her mother moved in to help, bringing her teenage brother Kyle. It was Mrs. Solange who finally pulled Jessica back from the edge, reminding her that Daniel would have wanted her to keep living, keep fighting. so Jessica dried her tears and went back to work. But working at small shops, always in the shadows, always underestimated, the bosses put her on basic jobs, changing oil, cleaning parts, while the male mechanics got the important work. But slowly, quietly, some ranchers in the region started asking for her specifically, especially when they had impossible problems, the ones nobody else could solve. Jessica became a silent legend in the agricultural circuit. Some called her the diesel doctor. But now, unemployed and desperate, she was driving from ranch to ranch, offering her services directly. It was humbling, she knew. But pride doesn't pay bills, doesn't put food on the table, doesn't solve her mother's health problems. When she pulled up to the gate of the R Ranch that morning, the security guard, Mr. Jim Walker, a man in his late 50s with a kind expression, was moved by the determination of this woman who arrived sweating, exhausted, but with steady eyes. "Ma'am, what brings you out here?" he asked gently. "Good morning, sir. My name is Jessica Tavares. I'm a mechanic. I'm looking for work. Any service on tractors, trucks, farm equipment? Does the owner need anyone?" Mr. Walker scratched his head thoughtfully. "Well now, normally I wouldn't let you through without calling ahead, but the boss has got a problem nobody's been able to solve. There's a Ram truck of his, real expensive one, been sitting dead for 4 months. We've had mechanics from all over, specialists, folks with degrees, and nobody's fixed it. The man's in a fury. If you want to try your luck, go on up. But I'm warning you, the boss ain't easy. He's, how do I put this, difficult to deal with." Jessica thanked him and drove up the ranch's internal road. The property was massive, with cattle pastures and hayfields stretching as far as the eye could see. Enormous barns housed state-of-the-art agricultural equipment. This was wealth, power. And she, an unemployed widow mechanic arriving in a beat-up Ranger, felt tiny. But she took a deep breath and drove on. The owner of that ranch was Robert Chambers, 44 years old, heir to a traditional ranching family from the Texas Hill Country. His father, old William Chambers, had built the R from nothing in the 1970s, and Robert inherited the empire. But he wasn't content just managing what he received. He expanded, bought 4 more properties, modernized everything, invested in cutting-edge technology. Today, his net worth was estimated at $45 million, cattle, hay, hunting leases, all on an industrial scale. Robert was respected, even feared in regional agribusiness circles. A ruthless businessman who didn't tolerate incompetence and firmly believed that money was the measure of a person's worth. But behind all that arrogance, all that hardness, there was a wound that never healed. 8 years ago, Robert had lost his wife, Claire. She was driving back from visiting her sister in San Antonio when a sudden storm hit. Her car hydroplaned on I-10 and went off an overpass. There were no survivors. Robert got the news by phone in the middle of a business meeting. Since that day, something in him broke. He closed off emotionally, became cold, distant, never had another serious relationship. Work became his obsession, his escape, and everyone around him became just pieces on a board, replaceable employees. His loneliness was profound, but he disguised it with arrogance and absolute control. And that September morning, Robert was especially furious. For 4 months, his Ram 3500 Laramie 2023, black, valued at $85,000 and equipped with a Cummins turbo diesel 6-cylinder engine, simply wouldn't start. The engine wouldn't turn over, simple as that. The dashboard showed only a generic error code, that P1087, indicating insufficient fuel pressure. Robert, who depended on that truck to oversee his 5 properties, called the best mechanic from the official dealership in Austin. The man came, ran tests, replaced the high-pressure fuel pump for almost $2,000. It didn't work. He called another specialist from San Antonio. They changed sensors, reprogrammed the electronic control module. Nothing. A third mechanic from Houston, renowned for diesel engines, spent 3 days at the ranch testing, disassembling, analyzing. Failed. A fourth, a fifth, a sixth mechanic. All charged a lot, some over $800 a day. All failed. 10 specialized mechanics with degrees, certifications, years of experience. Not one could make that Ram start. Robert had already spent almost $15,000 trying to fix it, and the truck sat there, parked in the central yard of the ranch, like a monument to his impotence. For the first time in his life, Robert's money didn't solve a problem. And that ate at him inside, fed his fury, his frustration. It was at this exact moment that Jessica pulled up to the central yard in her old Ranger. She saw the black Ram imposing, with the hood partially open, tools scattered around. And beside the truck, 3 men were talking in serious tones. One of them, the tallest, dressed in an expensive button-down shirt and imported leather boots, was clearly the owner, Robert Chambers. The other 2 were ranch managers. Jessica took a deep breath, got out of her truck, adjusted her worn cap, and approached with firm but respectful steps. "Good morning, sir." The 3 men stopped talking and looked at her. The silence was heavy. Robert examined her from head to toe, his eyes taking in the simple clothes, the grease stains, the calloused hands, the beat-up Ford Ranger. His face twisted into an expression mixing surprise, disbelief, and disdain. "Good morning," he responded, dragging out the words. "You lost? Vendors go around the other side." "No, sir, my name is Jessica Tavares. I'm a mechanic specializing in diesel engines. The guard at the gate told me you're having a problem with your truck. I'd like to offer my help." The silence that followed was excruciating. And then Robert started laughing, a sarcastic laugh full of contempt. The 2 managers beside him exchanged glances, not knowing how to react. You're a mechanic?" Robert asked in a tone that made absolutely clear he considered this a bad joke. "Sweetheart, 10 specialized mechanics have already looked at this engine. 10. Men with 20, 30 years of experience, with degrees from technical schools, with certifications from official dealerships, people who worked at factories and competition shops. And you, pulling up in that piece of junk with a worn-out toolbox, think you can fix what they couldn't?" Jessica felt her cheeks burn, but kept her voice firm and calm. "Sir, I know my appearance doesn't inspire confidence, but give me just one chance to look at the engine. If I can't identify the problem, I won't charge anything. I'm just asking for an opportunity." Robert crossed his arms and tilted his head, as if evaluating a child who just said something foolish. He looked at his managers, then back at Jessica. And you know what he thought at that moment? He thought, "This is going to be entertaining. I'm going to turn this into a show. I'm going to demonstrate to everyone here that there are limits, that not everyone can do everything." And it was at this moment, dear friends, that the situation went from embarrassing to absolutely cruel. Robert grabbed the radio clip to his belt and pressed the button. "Marcus, Rodriguez, Hank, everyone near headquarters, come to the central yard now. We've got a special attraction here." His voice echoed through the radios scattered around the ranch, and in just a few minutes, workers started arriving. Tractor operators who were checking equipment, combine operators on coffee break, administrators working in the offices, kitchen and housekeeping staff. In less than 10 minutes, there were 15 people gathered in a semicircle around the black Ram, all confused, curious, not understanding what was happening. Robert positioned himself beside Jessica, like a circus ringmaster about to reveal his main attraction. "Folks," he announced in a loud voice with a cynical smile on his face, "today we have a special surprise. This lady here, Jessica, pulled up in that old Ranger and introduced herself as a mechanic. She thinks she can fix what the best mechanics in Texas couldn't. Y'all know that Ram that's been sitting dead for 4 months, that's been through the hands of 10 specialists? She thinks she's got the solution." Some workers laughed nervously, others remained silent, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Jessica felt the weight of all those eyes on her, judging, doubting, some with pity, others with mockery. Robert continued, "So, Jessica, since you're so confident, tell me how much you charge for mechanic work." Jessica swallowed hard. "Sir, I usually charge $200 a day, depending on the complexity of the job." Robert's laugh was loud and theatrical. 200? Y'all hearing this? The real mechanics who came here charge $500, $800 a day. One charged $1,000, and she charges $200. That alone shows the difference between professional and amateur, doesn't it? One of the managers, Marcus Freeman, a man of 52, heavy-set, with a graying moustache and a permanently serious expression, approached. He'd always had difficulty accepting change, especially when it involved women in professions he considered exclusively male. "Robert, with all due respect," Marcus said, shaking his head, "bringing a woman to look at this ram is a waste of time. Women don't have the physical strength or technical skill for this kind of heavy work. This is a job for a man who really understands engines, torque, hydraulic pressure. No offense, but it's just reality." Robert agreed with a nod. "Exactly, Marcus, but let's be generous here. Let's give the lady a chance. After all, everyone needs to learn their limits, right?" He turned to Jessica again, now with a more aggressive, cutting tone. "Answer me something, sweetheart. You know what a common rail system is. Can you explain the difference between direct and indirect injection? Have you ever worked in your life on a Cummins ISB 6.7 turbo diesel engine with 370 horsepower? Ever touched a high-pressure pump that works at 2,500 pounds per square inch?" Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but Robert interrupted immediately. No, let me guess. You fix Hondas, Toyotas, those basic little things with gasoline engines, simple fuel injection, right? And now you want to work on a truck worth over $85,000 with cutting-edge technology, onboard computer, integrated electronic system. Do you have any idea of the responsibility?" The crowd was divided. Some men laughed openly, supporting the boss. Others, especially the three women who worked in the ranch kitchen, looked at Jessica with silent empathy, but none dared speak up. Confronting the boss meant risking their job. Robert was just getting started. He walked around Jessica like a prosecutor before a defendant. "Look at your calloused hands, dirty with grease, your old clothes worn out, your truck that looks like it's about to fall apart. You want me to believe you have technical knowledge superior to trained engineers? To mechanics certified by Cummins, by Ram? Do you really think I'm an idiot?" Jessica felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused. She refused with all her strength to let them fall. Her voice came out firm, controlled, but loaded with emotion. "Sir, I didn't come here to sell myself as superior to anyone. I came to offer help. Appearance doesn't define ability. Clothes dirty with grease mean I work, that I get my hands dirty. I know you don't know me, have no reason to trust me, but give me just one chance to look at the engine." Robert let out a bitter laugh. "A chance? You want a chance?" He pulled his wallet from his pocket, opened it, and took out a $100 bill. He extended the money toward Jessica. "Look, Mom, I'll make this easy for you. Take this money here, buy yourself a decent lunch and go home. Forget this crazy idea of being a mechanic. It's not for you. You seem like an educated lady, hard-working, but there are appropriate professions for women. Taking care of the house, working in an office, things like that. High-power diesel engines are another category. You don't have the physical structure, you don't have technical training, you don't have experience. Take the money and leave before you embarrass yourself more." The silence that followed was deafening. Some workers laughed, but it was uncomfortable laughter. Others looked away, ashamed to witness this. One of the cooks, Mrs. Lorraine, a woman in her 60s who'd worked at the ranch for 30 years, pressed her lips tight, clearly outraged, but without the courage to intervene. Jessica looked at the $100 bill extended in Robert's hand. She looked at the looks of pity, mockery, discomfort around her, and then something inside her, something that had been building over 13 years of silent humiliations, constant underestimation, being ignored for being a woman, and 3 years of grieving alone, simply refused to accept this. "Sir," she said, with a voice that surprised even herself with its firmness, "I didn't come here asking for charity. I came to offer my work, my knowledge, my skill. You can doubt me for being a woman. You can think I don't have the ability, but I know what I do. Give me 30 minutes with this engine, just 30 minutes. If I don't find the problem, you can send me away, and I promise I'll never come back here. But if I fix it, you're going to pay me double what you paid the last mechanic who tried and failed, and you're going to apologize in front of all these people here." The audacity of the proposal left Robert momentarily speechless. His eyes narrowed, and then a cruel smile formed on his face. "Double? You want double? The last mechanic charged $800 and didn't solve anything. You want 1D600? He laughed. "Fine, I accept. But there's one more condition. When you fail, and you will fail, you're going to admit in front of everyone here that you're nothing but an amateur who got in over her head. And more, you're going to push that truck of yours to the gate, not drive it. You're going to push it all 12 miles back to town to remember this lesson in humility." The cruelty of the proposal shocked even Marcus, who, despite his prejudice, had some notion of decency. But nobody protested. Robert's power was absolute there. Jessica, with her heart pounding in her chest, extended her hand. "Deal!" Robert shook her hand with excessive force, trying to intimidate, but Jessica didn't look away. 30 minutes, Robert announced to the crowd, looking at the expensive watch on his wrist. "Starting now. Nobody leaves. I want everyone as witnesses." Jessica approached the ram with firm steps, despite her legs trembling slightly. She could feel the 15 pairs of eyes fixed on her, judging every movement. The September sun was high now, punishing without mercy, and sweat ran down her face. But she couldn't think about that now. She had 30 minutes to prove her worth, to honor her father's memory, to show that competence has no gender. Before even opening the hood, she asked for the key. Robert, with a sarcastic smile, tossed the key in her direction on purpose, making it fall on the ground. Jessica picked it up without showing emotion, got in the truck and turned on the ignition. The digital panel lit up immediately, displaying that error code that had become familiar to everyone there. P-87, insufficient fuel pressure. "Every mechanic already saw that code, sweetheart," Robert commented loudly so everyone could hear. "That doesn't impress anyone. That's basic." Jessica didn't respond. She was concentrated, observing not just the code, but the panel's behavior, the speed at which the lights came on, the subtle sounds the system made trying to initialize. She turned off the ignition, waited 5 seconds, turned it on again. She repeated the process 3 times, always attentive to the smallest details. Some workers exchanged confused glances, thinking she was just wasting time. Then she got out of the truck, opened the hood, and finally revealed the Cummins ISB 6.7 engine. An imposing, powerful engine, with its 6 inline cylinders, turbocharger, intercooler, state-of-the-art electronic injection system. It was a masterpiece of automotive engineering, valued alone at over $15,000. And there she was, a widowed, self-taught mechanic who arrived in an old Ranger about to decipher the mystery that had defeated 10 specialists. Jessica went to her truck bed and opened her toolbox. From inside, she pulled a homemade mechanic's stethoscope that she'd built herself years ago, following instructions from her father's notebooks. It was a simple tool, but extremely effective for detecting internal sounds in pressurized systems. Marcus Freeman, the prejudice manager, let out a scornful laugh. Would you look at that, folks? She brought a toy stethoscope. This looks like something from a yard sale. Some laughed along. Robert crossed his arms, shaking his head as if watching a bad comedy, but Jessica completely ignored them. She asked for absolute silence, and surprisingly, Robert agreed, curious to see where this was going. For the next 12 minutes, Jessica worked with surgical concentration. She positioned the stethoscope at different points of the injection system, listening, analyzing, comparing sounds. She touched components with her fingertips, feeling imperceptible vibrations. She checked electrical connections, not with an expensive multimeter, but with the refined touch of someone who deeply knew this type of system. She partially disassembled the plastic cover of the engine to access the common rail fuel line, that critical component that distributes fuel under extremely high pressure to the injectors. The crowd watched in growing silence. There was something in the way she moved, in the confidence of her hands, in the methodology of her work, that was starting to plant seeds of doubt in the initial mockery. Even Robert, who started all this as a cruel spectacle, was now genuinely intrigued. Jessica placed the stethoscope on a specific valve, hidden between pipes in the lower part of the rail. Like lightning, she closed her eyes, concentrating only on the sound. And then, after long seconds, her eyes opened. Found the problem. The silence was total. Robert uncrossed his arms slowly. "And what's the problem, Doctor?" he asked with sarcasm still present in his voice, but now mixed with a hint of anxiety. Jessica pointed to the small valve she'd been examining. "The common rail pressure regulator is mechanically stuck in the closed position. It's a microscopic failure that electronic scanners can't detect because the component continues responding electrically as if it's functioning normally. But mechanically, internally, it's stuck. This causes a critical underpressure in the system that prevents the engine from generating the pressure needed for ignition. The result is this generic error code, P0087, that leads mechanics to look for the problem in the wrong places." Robert frowned. "All the previous mechanics tested the pressure system. They replaced the pump, replaced sensors, reprogrammed the control module. How did none of them find this?" "Because this valve has a failure rate of less than 0.2% according to Cummins technical manuals," Jessica explained calmly. "It's so rare for it to happen that it's not on standard checklists. The previous mechanics probably tested the pump output pressure, which was correct, tested the sensors, which were responding normally, but nobody manually tested the rail pressure regulator because it's a component that simply doesn't fail, except when it does." Hank Peterson, a 67-year-old tractor operator, approached, genuinely impressed. "And how do you identify that, young lady?" "By sound," Jessica responded, holding the stethoscope. "When you turn on the ignition, the high-pressure pump starts working. If you listen carefully to the common rail with a mechanical stethoscope, you can hear the difference between the sound of pressure being distributed evenly and the sound of pressure being blocked. It's a subtle difference, almost imperceptible, but it's there. I learned this technique from my father. He used to say that engines speak to those who know how to listen." Marcus Freeman, still skeptical, crossed his arms. "Even if your diagnosis is correct, fixing this requires specialized tools and a replacement part that costs $2,500 and takes 30 days to arrive from the supplier. You're not going to be able to do anything here and now." Jessica smiled for the first time since she'd arrived at the ranch. "I don't need a new part. I can manually unstick the regulator and recalibrate it. It's a delicate procedure that's not in the official Cummins manuals, but it's a field technique that exists among experienced mechanics. My father developed it after years working with agricultural engines and recorded it in his technical notebooks. I've practiced this technique dozens of times." Robert looked at his watch. "You've used 14 minutes. You have 16 left. I'll only need 12 more," Jessica responded with confidence. She went back to her toolbox and took out a set of small, precise tools. Some improvised, others adapted. There was a modified Allen wrench, surgical tweezers she'd bought at a medical supply store, a small precision hammer. To the observers, it seemed inadequate for working on an $85,000 truck, but Jessica knew exactly what she was doing. For the next 12 minutes, the entire ranch seemed to hold its breath. Jessica partially disassembled the injection system with precision that bordered on artistic. Each movement was calculated, each bolt removed with the exact torque not to damage the threads. She accessed the pressure regulator, a component the size of a lighter, hidden at an almost inaccessible angle. With the surgical tweezers and improvised lighting using her phone held with tape, she was able to visualize the internal mechanism of the valve. "Here it is," she murmured to herself. "The return piston is stuck from crystallized fuel residue. Someone probably filled up with low-quality diesel at some point." With millimetric movements, she used a sterilized needle to remove the microscopic residue that was preventing the piston from moving freely. It was watchmaker's work, not mechanic's work. It required patience, precision, and mainly deep knowledge of how that system worked internally. Robert approached, watching over her shoulder. For the first time, he wasn't mocking. He was genuinely fascinated by the level of technical skill he was witnessing. This widow, who he'd publicly humiliated, was doing something none of the certified mechanics could. She was actually solving the problem. After cleaning the mechanism, Jessica needed to recalibrate it. This required adjusting the internal spring tension of the regulator to ensure the operating pressure returned to correct parameters. She used a technique her father had noted in his notebooks, counting the number of rotations of the adjustment screw while observing the tactile resistance. It was primitive compared to modern electronic equipment, but extremely effective. Finally, she reassembled everything, checked each connection, each clamp, each sensor. She wiped her hands on an old rag she carried in her toolbox and turned to Robert. "You can start it." The clock showed 26 minutes since the challenge began. Robert looked at the truck, then at Jessica, then at the workers around them. His hand trembled slightly when he took the key. He got in the ram, settled into the leather seat, inserted the key in the ignition, and with his heart racing, turned it. The Cummins ISB 6.7 engine roared back to life. The sound was deafening, glorious, perfect. That deep, powerful rumble of a high-performance diesel engine functioning at full capacity. The digital panel lit up with no error codes. All systems responded normally. The truck that had been dead for 4 months, that had defeated 10 specialized mechanics, that had cost $15,000 in failed repair attempts, was running perfectly. The initial silence was broken by an explosion of reactions. The workers erupted in applause, shouts of surprise, exclamations of disbelief. Mrs. Lorraine, the cook, had tears in her eyes. Hank was clapping enthusiastically, grinning from ear to ear. Even some of the men who had laughed at Jessica were now applauding, genuinely impressed. Robert stayed seated in the truck with his hands on the wheel, the engine running, completely stunned. He couldn't process what he'd just witnessed. Slowly, as if in a trance, he turned off the engine, got out of the vehicle and stood facing Jessica. "How? How did you do that?" he asked, his voice choked, stripped of all its previous arrogance. Jessica, with dignity and calm, closed her toolbox. "With knowledge, sir, with dedication, and mainly with respect for the profession I chose." It was at this moment that Hank Peterson, the 67-year-old tractor operator, stepped forward. He was a man of few words, respected by everyone on the ranch for his 40 years of experience with agricultural machines. When he spoke, people listened. "Boss," he said, taking the cowboy hat off his head as a sign of respect. "Pardon me saying, but do you know who this lady is?" Robert, still in shock, looked at Hank. "What do you mean?" This here is Jessica Tavares, daughter of the late Anthony Tavares, who was the best agricultural mechanic this region ever had. Anthony was a living legend among the ranchers around here, and she inherited his talent, only multiplied by 10. The silence was absolute now. All eyes were fixed on Hank as he continued. In the ranch circuit, among folks who really understand heavy machinery, they call her the Diesel Doctor. She's famous, boss, famous for solving problems nobody else can. Me, myself, 2 years ago, I saw her fix a Peterbilt's 18-speed transmission that had been sitting dead for 6 months. 3 dealership mechanics had given up. She found the problem in less than an hour, a problem in the pneumatic system that nobody had thought to check. Another worker, Rick Morales, one of the combine operators, also approached. It's true, boss. My brother-in-law has a ranch over in Fredericksburg. Big property, equipment worth millions. Last year, his Case IH combine, a machine worth almost $500,000, had a complex electrical problem that left the equipment dead right in the middle of harvest, losing thousands a day. They called 3 engineers from the dealership, spent 2 weeks trying to fix it. Couldn't. Someone mentioned Jessica. She went there, boss. 2 hours. In 2 hours, she identified a short circuit in an electrical harness hidden behind the control panel, in a place not even the engineers thought to look. And you know how much she charged? $150, when she could have easily charged $2,000. One of the kitchen workers, Maria, a woman in her early 40s, also spoke up. My husband works at the Lazy K Ranch, over toward Kerrville. He told me that 2 years ago, their main John Deere tractor, that big green one, stopped working. It was an engine problem, but nobody could figure out exactly what. They called mechanics from Austin, San Antonio, even from Dallas. Nothing. Until the foreman there remembered the lady mechanic someone had mentioned. They called her. She identified it was a problem with the crankshaft rotation sensor, sending wrong data to the electronic control unit. She replaced the sensor, recalibrated the system, and the tractor ran perfectly again. The testimonies started multiplying. Worker after worker revealed stories about the legendary widow mechanic who traveled to ranches around the region, solving the impossible. Robert listened to all of it with an expression mixing shame, shock, and deep regret. How did he not know this? How had he publicly humiliated precisely the person with the reputation everyone was describing? Marcus Freeman, the prejudiced manager who had mocked Jessica, was pale. He knew he'd made a terrible mistake, not just moral, but professional. If he'd done the basics, a simple inquiry, he would have discovered who she was. Hank continued, now looking directly at Jessica with genuine respect. Ma'am, I knew your father. Anthony fixed tractors of mine for years. He was a good man, honest, and had a God-given gift for understanding machines. When he passed, a lot of folks around here felt the loss. And now, seeing you here doing what you did, I'm certain he'd be mighty proud. The words hit Jessica hard. For the first time since she'd arrived at the ranch, she couldn't hold back tears. They weren't tears of sadness or humiliation, but of recognition, of validation. For 13 years, she'd worked in the shadows, underestimated, ignored. And for the last 3, she'd done it while carrying the weight of widowhood alone. And now, there in front of 15 people, her story was being told, her talent was being recognized. Robert took a few steps back, staggering slightly. He looked at the ram, running perfectly, then at Jessica, then at all his workers, who now looked at her with admiration. And then something inside him, something that had been locked away for 8 years since Claire's death, broke open. Tears started streaming down Robert Chambers' face. For the first time in 8 years, that hard, cold, controlling man was crying in public. And then, to the absolute shock of everyone present, he fell to his knees before Jessica. "Forgive me," he said, his voice breaking. "Forgive me, Jessica. Forgive me for what I said, for what I did, for how I treated you. I humiliated you, disrespected you, judged you without knowing you. I'm an arrogant idiot who thinks money and power mean something, but you gave me the biggest lesson in humility of my life." The entire ranch was silent, witnessing this surreal moment. The all-powerful boss, the $45 million businessman, was on his knees crying, asking forgiveness from a widow mechanic who arrived in a beat-up truck. Jessica, with the dignity that always characterized her, extended her hand and helped Robert stand. "Mr. Chambers, I accept your apology. Everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone can learn and change." Robert held her hand with both of his, as if holding something precious. How did you learn all this?" Jessica took a deep breath. "Sir, I was 22 when my father passed. It was a heart attack. No warning, no time to say goodbye. My mother was left alone with 3 kids. I'd just gotten married, was starting my life with my husband Daniel. But I couldn't just watch my family struggle. I needed to help." She paused, the painful memories returning. "That's when I found my father's notebooks. He had a habit of writing down everything he learned about engines, mechanical systems, hydraulics, electrical. Years and years of knowledge recorded in careful handwriting. I started studying those notebooks like they were the Bible. I watched videos online, read technical manuals, and mainly I practiced. Any broken engine I found, I'd take apart, study, try to fix. Abandoned tractors, old trucks, anything. I spent years doing this, learning on my own." Robert was listening with total attention, as was everyone else present. Mrs. Lorraine was openly crying now. "During these 13 years, Jessica continued, I worked at small shops, always earning less than the male mechanics, always doing the jobs nobody wanted. But slowly, some ranchers started calling me when they had complicated problems. They didn't care that I was a woman. They only cared about results, and I delivered results." Her voice wavered slightly. "And then, 3 years ago, I lost Daniel, my husband, construction accident. One day he left for work, kissed me goodbye like always, and never came home." The silence was profound. Some of the women were crying. Even some of the men who had mocked her earlier looked down, ashamed. Becoming a widow at 32, it nearly broke me. For months I could barely function. My mother moved in to help. My little brother was still in high school, and I had to keep going. Not just for me, but for them. Daniel would have wanted me to keep fighting. She looked around at all the workers. "I didn't come here today expecting respect. I came expecting another rejection, another humiliation. I'm used to it. But I came anyway because my mother needs dental work that costs $4,000, and my brother is starting college. I came because I don't have a choice. And I came because every engine I fix is a way to honor my father's memory, to prove that his talent didn't die with him. And it's a way to honor Daniel too, who always believed in me, even when nobody else did." The silence was reverent now. Robert passed his hands over his face, wiping the tears. "Jessica, I lost my wife 8 years ago, car accident. Since then I've closed off emotionally. I became hard, cold, controlling. I treat people like objects, like replaceable parts. I buried myself in work so I wouldn't have to process the grief, and I became exactly the kind of person I would despise if I met them." He looked at her with painful sincerity. "Today you didn't just fix my truck. You broke something in me, something that needed to be broken. This arrogance, this coldness, this disrespect for people. You showed me that real value isn't in degrees, in money, in power. It's in knowledge, in dedication, in character. And you showed me that grief doesn't have to make us cruel. You lost your husband, and you're still kind. I lost my wife, and I became a monster." Robert then pulled his wallet from his pocket and started counting $100 bills. He counted until he had 16 of them. And dang 600, double what he'd paid the most expensive mechanic. He extended the money to Jessica. This is yours. You earned it fair and square, but this isn't enough. It's not even close to enough to make up for what I did. Jessica took the money, but before she could thank him, Robert continued, I want to make you an offer. Work for me, not as a regular employee, but as head of the technical department for all 5 of my ranches. You'll supervise maintenance for all the equipment, 47 tractors, 12 combines, 23 trucks, dozens of agricultural implements, executive salary, $8,000 a month, company truck for your use, your own team to build and train, total autonomy. The proposal left Jessica speechless. $8,000 a month. She'd never earned more than $3,000 in her life. And more, Robert continued, now with a firm, decided voice. I'm going to invest in building a technical training center here in the region. It's going to be called the Anthony Tavares Technical Training Center, in honor of your father. We'll offer free courses in diesel mechanics, agricultural mechanics, hydraulic and electrical systems. And we're going to focus especially on recruiting and training women and widows trying to rebuild their lives, to break this idiotic prejudice that I myself perpetuated for years. You'll be the technical coordinator. The workers erupted in applause again. Mrs. Lorraine ran and hugged Jessica, crying with happiness. Hank shook her hand firmly with deep respect. Even Marcus Freeman approached, embarrassed, and offered sincere apologies. Jessica, still processing everything, looked at Robert. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you accept, Robert responded with a genuine smile, the first real smile in years. Give me the chance to fix the mistake I made. Give me the chance to do something good, something that really matters. Jessica wiped her tears, took a deep breath and extended her hand. I accept. 15 months later, the Double R Ranch was a completely different place, and not just because of the new structure that had been built at the entrance to the property, a modern 2-story building with the name Anthony Tavares Technical Training Center, engraved in large letters on the facade. The transformation was much deeper than bricks and concrete. Jessica Tavares arrived every morning driving a silver F-250 company truck, the same one Robert had put at her disposal on her first day of work. She now commanded a team of 5 mechanics, 3 men and 2 women, all personally chosen by her. The technical department she built from scratch became a regional reference. Robert's 5 ranches had never had equipment so well maintained, so efficient. The savings from preventive maintenance in the first year exceeded $200,000, a figure that impressed even the most skeptical financial auditors. But what really transformed that place was the training center. Robert invested $1.2 million in the construction and equipment of the technical school, modern workshops, state-of-the-art tools, educational engines, electronic simulators, all free for students. The first class had 60 students, and 40 of them were women. Young people of 18, 20, 25 years old, and also widows in their 30s and 40s, looking for a new start, all coming from Austin, San Antonio, small towns in the hill country, all with the same sparkle in their eyes that Jessica had when she began her journey. Jessica gave volunteer classes on Saturdays. She taught not just the technical part, but mainly confidence, dignity, the certainty that women could master any profession they chose, that loss didn't have to define them, that they could rebuild their lives with their own hands. When she told her own story, about the father she lost, about the husband who was taken too soon, about the years of humiliation, about that day at the Double R Ranch, the students saw themselves in her and understood that it was possible. Robert had also changed profoundly. He started treating his workers with genuine respect. He learned everyone's names, asked about their families, listened to their concerns. The ranch, which before was a place of tension and fear, became an environment where people actually wanted to work. And for the first time in 8 years, Robert started processing his grief over losing Claire. He sought therapy, something he'd always considered a thing for weak people, and discovered that admitting vulnerability is actually the greatest demonstration of strength. On a sunny December afternoon, Jessica was at the training center supervising a practical exercise with the students when Robert appeared. He watched in silence for a few minutes, seeing those women working confidently on complex diesel engines, laughing, learning, growing. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked Jessica. They went out to the external yard. Robert looked at the building, at the sign with Anthony Tavares' name, and smiled. "You know what your mother told me the other day?" Jessica smiled. Mrs. Solange now worked as administrator of the training center, handling enrollments, documentation, organization. Her dental treatment had been paid for, and she was happy, fulfilled, proud of her daughter. Kyle had started at Texas State, studying mechanical engineering, inspired by his sister. She said your father would be proud, not just of you, but of all this here, of knowing that his knowledge didn't die, but multiplied in dozens of other people. And she said Daniel would be proud too, that he always knew you were destined for great things. Jessica felt tears come, but now they were good tears. I think about them every day. Every student who graduates, every engine my team fixes, is a tribute to both of them, to my father who gave me the knowledge, and to Daniel who gave me the courage to believe in myself. Robert took a deep breath. "Jessica, I wanted to thank you. You changed my life. You showed me I was wasting my existence being bitter, arrogant, empty. Today, I wake up with purpose, knowing I'm doing something that really matters. And it all started with you that morning, when you had the courage not to give up, even after everything I did. Everyone deserves redemption, Robert. You proved that." As the sun set over the cattle pastures, painting the sky orange and red, Jessica looked at the future with hope. Her brother Kyle was at the university studying mechanical engineering, inspired by her. Her mother was happy and healthy. And she, a widowed, self-taught mechanic who arrived at that ranch in an old truck, was now department head teacher and inspiration for dozens of women rebuilding their lives. Jessica Tavares' story spread through the region, became a feature in local newspapers, was the subject of a TV news report. But for her, what really mattered was right there, in that training center, in the calloused hands of those students, who would learn that competence has no gender, that talent isn't measured by appearance, that loss doesn't have to break you, and that dignity is something no one can take from you. And Robert Chambers, the businessman who once humiliated a widow out of prejudice, learned the most important lesson of his life. That true wealth isn't in how much you have, but in how many lives you transform for the better. That real power doesn't come from control, but from humility. And that sometimes the person who arrives in a beat-up truck with simple clothes and hands dirty with grease, carrying grief in her heart but fire in her eyes, can teach more about human value than all the degrees and certificates in the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Engines of Hope, hit that like button, and tell us in the comments what state you're watching from. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to start over. Your story of overcoming might be the next one we tell here. Until next time, friend.